today we're here to kind of just talk about just the topic of Black church and like spirituality and religion all together. And I thought you would be a really great asset to this conversation just because of your experience. It's like different and unique in and of itself, being somebody who's still very like spiritual and who's like a part of like the LGBT community, correct as well.
Correct.
Yeah,
most definitely.
So it's just awesome like kind of like dialogue to definitely get into.
And I'm a Black queer woman, so I don't get asked to have these conversations a lot. I don't get asked about the church a lot. So this is a great forum, and I really appreciate you reaching out. This is a great discussion to have amongst a lot of diverse people. So because everybody's perspective is pretty unique. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Now the heat's on for me. Like it's the first. No, but so I always start with this question for everybody. But like, what was your kind of experience or introduction to church? Like, what did that look like? How did it start? Certainly.
So I'm from the South. I'm from Arkansas. I don't think you can grow up in the South and be Black and not go to church. So, just to start, I like to tell people all the time that I grew up in a very deeply religious household. So a very strictly religious household. So when I talk about religion and I talk about Christianity, it's not coming from a place of ignorance. It's coming from a place of knowledge.
That was your culture. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And not even in my own household, when you grow up in an environment like the Deep South and, with our people, the church is a part of everybody's life. It may not be the same church you go to, but the church is a part of everybody's life. So it wasn't just in my household; it was all around me. So anything that I say about the church, and specifically the Christian church, I should clarify that, comes from a place of knowledge. It doesn't come from a place of me just...
And it's experience.
Yeah, it's experience. It's experience for sure. So that was my introduction as my entire life was...
Wow. So just from like Sunday school to like
from every day of the week, there seemed to be something related to the church going on, whether it was actually going to services or going to some type of alternative to the services. That every day of the week seemed to have something related, or if you were just in the house reading the Bible or speaking about it. So it was always there. Faith and church was always a part of my upbringing. And I will say it was a bit unorthodox because my family were Jehovah's Witnesses. So that's Christianity, but a little unorthodox than the average Christian church. And then I also came from individuals who were Baptist. So having a lot of different sides of coins.
A lot, for sure.
So it's having that experience just all around.
So I would imagine too that like a lot of the friendships that you had as well, kind of like growing up, were kind of like fully invested, like kind of out of kind of like this association of church. Like, would that be?
I don't know anyone that I grew up with who did not go to church. There wasn't anybody that I knew whose family did not have a church situation that they were in. Different levels of faith, obviously, but like I said, in the environment that I grew up in, there was not, especially amongst Black people, amongst my people, you didn't really know anyone that didn't have some type of church experience. That was just unheard of.
Yeah, definitely. So you grew up in the South in Arkansas. And when was your move? What kind of sparked your move to the Quad Cities and all that?
Yeah, so I went to college and I majored in journalism. That's what I always wanted to do with my life. So I thought at the time is be a newspaper reporter. I started out with that. I couldn't really get into that where I was in Arkansas, so I had to move. So I moved to Missouri first. Decided to get my master's while I was in Missouri in communications. The career brought me to the Quad Cities. Looking anywhere in the country for career opportunity landed me with the Dispatch and Argus newspaper, and that's what brought me to the Quad Cities about 11 years ago. I've switched careers a couple times while I've been here, and I've made this my home, so I put roots down here.
The good old Midwest.
It's a great community. So
definitely,
once I found Rock Island, I pretty much thought, this is home. This is where I need to be, and this is where I can be effective and useful, and this is where I can be helpful to a community. So I stayed here.
Community, most definitely. So, what's kind of like we're gonna jump back to kind of like your college experience and everything, like going to school and all that. Did you go like just kind of like knowing your background and everything? Was it like a private school kind of like setting, or was it just like a public school?
I went to a state school.
State school,
a state university in Arkansas. for undergraduate. And that's where I really start to being outside of the home that I grew up in and being outside of that religious setting. That's where I really kind of started to think for myself a bit.
Yeah.
And like most young people, when you go to college, you start to question a bit more. You learn a lot and you question, a lot of things that you've been taught. So that's where, in my mind, it really started to become a questioning process. Is, do I go along with things just because I was taught them? Or do I try to learn for myself? Do I try to build my own self-philosophies? Do I try to really think for myself? That's where that started. Going off to college and being put in another setting and being put in a very, diverse environment. That's where it really started for me, because I was meeting people of all these different religious backgrounds that were not like mine.
Yeah.
And so I was learning a lot. And so that led to my questioning of not just religion, but of many things. That's also where I discovered really my true sexuality. And that's where I decided to come out to for the first time was in college. So a lot of that spurred some things in me that were more individual and a bit more questioning. So not just to go along with everything you've ever been told, but to start to question and build your own philosophies.
You had that newfound kind of like freedom to like say like you don't have to like live by this adjusted like way of living, but there's so many other things to like kind of like
the world's a bigger place. There's a lot more to learn than just what you've been taught in your little corner of the world. And there are a lot more people who don't believe like you, but are amazing people. So there must be something to that.
Yeah.
There must be something out there a bit bigger than what you've been taught. So that's where I started to question.
Awesome. It's always so funny for me to kind of hear that, because like I feel like my experience was just so backwards. Like I grew up in church for like a very short term period, but it wasn't until I got to college that I actually got more invested in the church and then just like Bible studies and in religion altogether. But it wasn't outside of my like after my fourth year of college, like outside of that setting is when I was like just started to question things. I feel like being in the world. So like when I hear people say like they went to college and that's where they start questioning, it's just like that's unique.
And it became a lot more apparent. After college, you're still really on a search for a lot of people. You're still searching for, you're still very young. You're still searching for who you are, who you're going to be, what do you feel, what do you believe. So even after college, I mean, the search continued. It definitely didn't end there. And it's for me with religion, it really became eye-opening that, I really developed the sense that religion, organized religion, in the sense of having those organizations that are religiously affiliated, that wasn't for me. That wasn't a place that I necessarily wanted to be anymore. I didn't want to be affiliated with a organized religion. I started to focus more on spiritual relationships with God. And I wholly believe that there was not, and there still isn't, just one path to God. But I was taught my entire life that there was only one path, that certain religions are the only way to get to God, or the only way to get God's favor was through one path. And I began to believe within myself what I still believe today is that is completely not true, or at least it's not true for me. I've seen so many different ways to get close to God, and I've seen so many different paths that have nothing to do with an organization that is an affiliated religion, or has nothing to do with a religion that is man-made or a building or anything like that. It has so much more to do with the way you treat people, the way you are internally, what's in your heart. And then also, what you put back out into the world. So the path to God for me really changed. It really did a complete change. As far as I didn't need to be in a building anymore on a certain day. I needed to be always, always, always available to the world around me, and always trying to improve the world around me. That was the path of God, to God that I chose. Again, that's different for everyone. But for me, it went from religious to spiritual. It did a really big jump. And I see the difference between the two. Whereas many people can combine those effectively, that wasn't my path. My path was a spiritual one and not a religious one.
Yeah, definitely. It just kind of like, from what I hear, like it just became like less kind of superficial and less like faith on the things that are seen. And you kind of like put more of an emphasis on like what internally is going on and how that affects you, and like giving to community and all that.
Most certainly. From what I know of Christianity, following Christ, and I do believe probably more in tune with Christianity than any other religion. But
definitely.
From what I understand of Christ, he was a person that didn't prescribe to any religious affiliation. He didn't, serve in the temples. He didn't, when he went there, he usually went there to, call what would be known as cause some trouble. He was overturning money tables, and he was constantly at odds with the rabbis, and he wouldn't even allow himself to be called a religious title. What he really stressed was, loving God first, and then loving all other human beings the same way you love yourself.
Exactly.
And he served the way he served, was very evident of that. How he went out and he served the people, and he went to where the people were. He didn't wait for the people to come to him or seek him out. He really was out, and he was seeking out the people who needed him the most, the brokenhearted, those who were really having the toughest time with life. And so, I really like to think that, if Christ were here today, he'd be doing the same thing. He may not be in a building every Sunday or whatever day, and he may not have a denomination behind his name or the word pastor or anything like that. But I like to believe that he would be out, serving, and he would be out on the streets, and he would be out, taking care of people who needed it the most. And so that's kind of a philosophy that I like to live by. Again, it doesn't really need a denomination behind it. It's just something that I think is the right thing to do, and I don't do it out of any fear. And I got into an argument with a Christian friend of mine when I said this once, and I don't do anything out of fear of God, and I don't do anything out of fear of what may happen to me in the afterlife, whether I'm going to go up or down or heaven, hell. I don't operate anything in my life out of those two fears. I operate on what internally, what my heart and mind tells me is right. And that's all a spiritual thing. I don't put that there myself. I like to think that God puts that there. He puts me in the spaces that he wants me to be in to do the most good. And up to this point, he's never put me in a church to do that. He's put me in a lot of other positions, but he's never put me in a religion to do those things. So that's how I operate, and I like to think that I'm being most effective that way. And I like to think that that's also what Jesus would do. Most definitely. Here. And again, that's just an opinion of mine. That's not something that I think is kind of something everyone should believe. But I think religion is wonderful for people when it makes them a more tolerant person. It makes them a more loving person. It makes them a more giving person. I think religion is amazing. I know many, many people who have allowed religion to come into their life and make them greater human beings. I also know the other side of that. I also know that religion has caused a lot of issues, even in my own life and my own family, with intolerance, with bigotry, with a lot of things that religion has done on the negative side of things. And so, for me, the divide is just a bit too large.
Wow.
So for myself, I kind of go a little left of center there. But
no, I'm glad you brought that up though too, because I want to touch on more of just kind of like that. Of your experience, kind of like finding your identity, like in kind of the LGBT community, and still kind of like having this like fully invested like culture that you came from, like family that you came from, like that was very invested in that. Like how was that kind of received when you kind of like came, like kind of like was able to just living your identity openly?
It was not received well for religious reasons. As I mentioned, if I would have stayed in the religious community that I was in, I would have never come out. I mean, just honestly, it just would have never happened. I would have possibly lived a double life, or I would have possibly, which I was anyway, I would have possibly just still been acting upon those urges, but I would have never actually come out. It's not accepted. It wasn't going to be accepted, and it didn't matter who you were. So within my own experience, I lost a lot of close people to me because of that. I didn't change any as a person. I was still the same person that I always was. I just was outside of a religious stipulation, which was you're unacceptable or you're wrong if you are this thing, which happens to be gay. And there's a lot of other wrongs that churches teach, but this was one that affected me personally, and it really did end a lot of close relationships. And for me, I kind of took an attitude of if the God you serves really wants you to feel that way, or really wants you to treat others that way, I don't want to serve your God. But good luck with that. Live your life however you want to live your life, and I will do the same. But if you're coming from a place and you're putting that on a God, or if you're putting that on a religion, you can have that. That's not for me. That's not something I would ever need in my life. That leads to separatism. That leads to hate. That leads to intolerance. Those are not godly qualities in my mind. So I don't want any part of any religion or any God that will lead people down a path to judge others, or hate others, or separate others, or be intolerant of others based on something like sexual orientation, no more than I'd want to be a part of any religion that did that based on race. So for me, there's no separating that out. So it was something that I really I battled with. You know, how do I step away from what I've known my entire life and be someone I've also known I am my entire life? How do I do that? It took me some years, let me tell you. It really took me some years and a lot of soul searching to finally realize you can still be, because I was literally told God will not love you anymore. Those exact words were told to me by a very close family member. And when it really sunk in, I was like, oh, so we can speak for God now. Oh, that's unique. So for me, it was possibly a blessing in disguise to step away and really finally, even though it hurt and even though it was a big ordeal in my life for a long time, once I really got out of that whirlwind, now I look back and I say, you know, wow, I wish I would have done that a lot sooner, because I wasted a lot of years stuck just based on something that now I don't believe to be true at all. So.
Most definitely. Yeah, that's all. I connect so much with the, like, kind of your story and that, and like, which kind of leads to kind of like this last question. Like, for me, the church that I was at about 2 years ago, like, I was on like route to get like a license as like a church planner, and I was taking just a whole bunch of like theology courses and all that. But there was like one thing that happened, just of like voicing my opinions about social injustice and kind of like receiving a bad end of like, just shut up about that, don't talk about that, and like maybe in the decision of like, I don't want to be part of that then. And out of that experience, like, I lost a lot of friends in a sense, like, well, and it was hard. Like, I kind of felt isolated, like, man, like, this stinks. Like, I'm by myself and all that. But I kind of asked that, like, for you, like, how did you keep centered in faith and in God, like, in that place of kind of like isolation or kind of marginalization?
I only focused on my relationship with God. I didn't focus on what the congregation thought or what the church leaders thought, or what my own family members thought who were a part of that religion. I had to really get that out of my heart. Because a lot of times, I mean, if we're just being honest, a lot of times with religious organizations, it's the face that you present when you're there, the face that you present in church. Like, I watched a lot of things happen in my household that were not church worthy at all. We didn't talk about those things when we stepped into the church. We presented a whole different face. And so, again, who are you trying to please when you walk into that building? Are you trying to please God, or are you trying to please the people around you, the church leaders, you know, the people that you want to look good for? So I really had to get out of my heart the pleasing of man. And I just stayed in close contact with God. God knew from the moment he formed me who I was. So me lying to everybody else, he already knew, and I think he also probably already knew at some point I would, you know, come and live my truth. But I had to stay just in close contact with God on my own. I didn't need anyone else praying for me. I didn't need a group or a congregation to be behind me or not be behind me. When I lost that, it became clear that I didn't really need that. Because my life actually got so much better, and I got so many more blessings in life when I decided to live my truth. When I was living a lie, I really was the product of that lie. Everything about my life was false. It was fake. I wasn't succeeding. I wasn't getting anywhere. I was staying stuck. When I finally did tell that truth and start to actually live it, even though I lost some people, my life got tremendous. I gained so many more people in my life than those that I lost. And I also gained such a more clear and concise relationship with God, because I could go to God honestly, and I was not hiding anything, and I was not living a falsehood. And I just felt this whole burden being lifted off my shoulders and off my life. And for that, that's nothing but God. I mean, that wasn't me that did that. So, you know, And again, it was a deeply internal feeling that I did not have to go to a building and worship to receive. I received that when I finally started doing what I think God wants us to do, which is be our authentic selves, love Him first, and then love our neighbors as we love ourselves, and treat our neighbors the way He would treat it. And when we see injustice, we fight for it. And when we see things that aren't fair to marginalized people, we fight for them. And when there is good to be done, we go do it. We don't wait to be asked. We go and we do it. That's exactly what I felt happened for me when I finally just started living that life, is when things became so much more easier for me as a human being.
There's a big weight lifted.
Big weight. It was like a ton of bricks were gone, and I was able to finally just move about in the world and see through eyes that were really unclouded.
That's awesome. Wow. Thank you for sharing that so much.
No problem.
I think that's it for the episode. That was, thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.